Good morning, ladies and coronavirus germs. This is your ticker guy update for the 10th. And boy, do we have some interesting stuff going on today. We start with politics, but I'm going to start with markets. I usually don't do markets on these podcasts, or at least not much in the way of markets. But I have to. I just have to. I have to gloat a little bit, too. So there's, for those of you that are unaware, there are these double inverse and positive ETFs on the S&P, SDS and SSO. And these are normally very dangerous things to play with, and the reason is they all decay towards zero. The reason they all decay towards zero has to do with the fact that they're daily compounding. And if you want to model this for yourself, get out your Excel and take a look at what happens with a 1% up, 1% down change with a 2 times multiplier. Start with a base of $100 and just randomly go, up a percent, down a percent, up a percent, down a percent, up 2%, down 2%, up 1, down 2. If there is no trend, if the movement is essentially random, what you will get is that the value will still lose over time, and it has to do with the basic fact of investing, okay? And that is, if you make 50% and then you lose 50%, you'd say, well, I'm back to even, but no, you're not. That's not how it works, okay? You go from 100 to 150, and then you lose half, and now you're at 75. Oops. Okay, same problem. If you lose 50%, you go from 100 to 50, right? What do you need to get back to even? You need a double. So this is something that most people pay absolutely zero attention to because they are math challenged, and this is why brokerages love you. This is why they love to churn accounts. This is why they love it when you trade a lot. It is very, very hard to be an active member of the market. In other words, trading all the time and actually make money. And this is part of the reason why. It's really, really tough, folks. There's a lot of people out there who claim, I've got this system. I've got this thing that shows me. I guarantee this will work. Well, let me tell you something. When the other blow-up was going on, myself and many others thought that we had found, we'd found something like this that would actually work. And all of them seem to work for a little while. You can backtest all you want. Backtesting is worthless. This is one of the things that you find out when you do this for some period of time. One of the things I learned from the blow up in the market in 2000 is that all the backtesting in the world, all the models in the world do not mean jack. And while it's good to use that as a first level filter, because if you can't, whatever you're trying to do, if you can't pass that screen, then I guarantee whatever you're doing is going to work. The odds of that being nirvana and being proof is basically zero. So what you have to do is take whatever it is you think you came up with, and you have to run with it for a while and try it for a while. But God help you if you do it with money you can't afford to lose, because the odds of you actually having found something that works over a long period of time is close to zero. The other problem is that in the world we live in today, where the Federal Reserve changes the rules whenever it feels like it, the government changes the rules whenever they feel like it, and basically everybody plays all sorts of games all the time with the markets, and they goose this and they play with that. All the indicators that would work on sentiment and things like this are not worth all that much, because the rug gets yanked out from under you as soon as these patterns get established. And it's not so much that these guys are trying to do evil to you. It's that they're trying to prevent things from going in the way that they want to go. And so the intervention does not actually change the long-term trajectory, but what it does do is change the short-term outcomes. And unfortunately, the margin clerk is much faster on the phone than you are in terms of being able to survive that most of the time, especially when you get cranked up with this idea that you're smarter than everybody else, and therefore that means that you can play with size that you should not be playing with. Yeah, it's levered instruments are especially dangerous in this regard. Anyway, I into the huge plunge, I had a nice little position on, very small, and then last night I flipped it around right near the close, go the other direction, and as I am recording this, the S&P futures are up 87 points. It's not a lot of money, but it'll put some gas in the truck. So that's not bad. I'll take it. There's a stop on that now. I really don't care if it collapses on me into the middle of the day. But the Dow, as I record this, is up about 3%. Considering that the plunge was about double that yesterday. And same thing for the S&P and such. And oh, by the way, for those of you that think it's coronavirus related, it's not. Oil is up 7% today. Trading 33.52 at this recording. Up about almost $2.50. And that's because the Saudis kind of clarified their "we're going to play fuck thing with Putin or fuck it. I think pew pew sounds better, don't you? Pew 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 pew. Anyway, got to make light of this. It's actually kind of amusing that it's blown up all of the dreams and beliefs, especially of all those woke people that were, oh my God, President Trump is in the back pocket of Vlad. Yes, he is. And you will, I hope you will excuse my occasional sips of my coffee mug while I record this as well. So anyway, the bottom line is you got a nice little bounce. It's not from coronavirus. It is from and Trump's. I'm going to try to get a payroll tax cut passed. Yeah, okay. You go ahead and you do that. No, it has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with the fact that the oil war has been clarified as, we're not really going to do what everyone thought we were. Yeah, okay, bullshit. May I point out that all these producers that are levered up to their nuts in the Permian are actually not able to functionally operate with oil at $33 or at $40 for that matter. They need prices in the 50s and above, and that's going to be a problem for them. It's not going to be a problem for them instantly, but it is going to be a problem for them. Remember, it does take time to run out of money and file bankruptcy. And so the issue is that when if you have a cost of sucking a barrel out of the ground using whatever technology you're using, fracking and shale processing and whatever, if your cost of sucking a barrel out of the ground is $52 and the price of oil after you suck it out of the ground and you process it is $33, for every barrel you suck out of the ground you go broke faster. and oh, by the way, allowing cartels to operate in other nations that have every reason to see America get hosed up the ass is one of the stupidest things that our Congress could ever do. Do not try to blame this on the president. It goes all the way back to all of the administrations and all the Congresses, all the way back to the original Arab oil embargo in the 1970s. We did this to ourselves. And therefore, if you want to blame somebody, you need, if you are older than, I don't know, like anything, right? Because you haven't done anything about it. If you were alive in the 1970s and have been alive since, you need to get up, go walk your ass in front of the mirror in the bathroom and take a good long stare at the person that is responsible. No, you cannot fix this with wokeism and cars. Oh, by the way, read my column on Lil Chicky out in Washington that's all pissed off about the government. Mommy, please help me. After Miss Woke creates all the conditions that lead to all of the terrible things that are going on out in Washington right now. That would be your fault, little Chicky D. I've got bad news for you. You deserve exactly nothing with regards to that. Have a good day. It never ceases to amaze me, folks, that people do this kind of bullshit. Never in my life does it cease to amaze me. And yet it goes on all the damn time. Let's see. Sanctuary cities, third world nation, imports. We're going to put all of our production over there. We're going to base companies there that have to deal with these people. And therefore, we've got people flying in and out and in and out and in and out. And oh, boy, by the way, they brought back coronavirus. And yet it's someone else's fault. It's not mine. Never mind that in addition to that, we also displaced all the people of lower means, in lower production capacity, a little bit not as smart. Yeah, right. You know, you've got a bell curve in IQ. What are you going to do with all the people who have IQs of 80? What are you going to do with the handful that have IQs of 70? There are some of the latter. There are a lot of the former who have 80s and 90s. Okay, in fact, given that it's centered on 100, there's quite a few that have slightly under 100, right? About the same number that have slightly over 100. Yeah. What are you going to do with all those people after you offshore all their jobs to China? Well, some of them are going to end up shitting in the middle of the road and doing heroin every day. That's really wonderful for your sanitation posture. And then you're going to hire some of the lower income ones to wipe the butts of incontinent seniors in a nursing home, go home, and then try to, because you pay them like shit, they're going to go home and they're going to pick up side jobs doing so-called home health care. Well, you know, there's just a little problem with that, in that there's no monitoring of what's going on in terms of infection control and cross-contamination, everything. Gee, I wonder why Kirkland was the center of this. Amazing. And the political aspect of this is something else, okay? All right, let's talk about primaries, because it's primary day today. Michigan may be the end of Bernie, other than as a protest candidate. There are some very strong indications in some of the polling data. I don't trust polls so much anymore. Most of the time they're good, but not always, and this may be one of those times. We just don't know. But there are indications in the polling data that Bernie's campaign may essentially be over in terms of being a serious run for president tonight. Take a look very closely at Michigan's delegate count and how the Michigan vote goes. He is going to win out west. I don't think there's any question there, because Ms. Woke is voting today. Yes, Ms. Woke. Ms. Woke gets to cast her ballot for the Bolshevik, and probably will. However, Mr. X automaker, whether he's going to cast a ballot for Mr. Bolshevik is an open question. 4 years ago, this was one of the defining moments in Bernie's attempt to take away Hillary's crown. And the thing that you have to remember, folks, is that the people have had 4 more years of thinking about not only Hillary and Bernie, but also about the Donald. Now, I don't think Michigan has shifted much to the R side of the column. Michigan's a funny state, and its political environment is like so many states that have a generalized central place where everything happens in terms of politics. That would be Detroit. The rest of the state, not so much. Now, the other part of Michigan that makes their political environment a little weird is that they've also got a significant number of other cities, all in the lower part of the state, all Flint and below, essentially. You can kind of take a line, draw it across approximately at Flint, and everything below that has a very high probability of having a third world shithole somewhere within it. And then you have the few exceptions. There are some smaller towns within that area that are actually quite nice and reasonable. However, you have Flint itself, where the Democrat-controlled government essentially poisoned all the children with lead because they shifted their water without paying attention to the balance of chemicals. They shifted the source, didn't pay attention to the fact that lead line pipes are all over the place, which, by the way, are perfectly safe as long as the chemical water balance is maintained. Okay. And the reason that they were used years ago, nobody uses them anymore, because now we have plastics, specifically HDPE, that is tougher, it is reasonably cheap, and it has all the properties you want in a water distribution pipe. Okay. HDPE, however, didn't exist when these cities were built, and lead was used because lead is quite stable. It's reasonably ductile, so if the ground moves a little bit, you get some frost heaving, whatever, it doesn't instantly shatter, all right, because it's got some ductility to it. That's good. The problem, of course, is that lead is poisonous. So if it leaches into the water, that's a huge problem. So what you do is you put chemicals into the water to balance the pH, and lead, much like aluminum, forms a protective oxide layer on the inside of the pipe, and then no more lead leaches in. And this happens very, very rapidly. So if this is done correctly, in other words, if you pay attention, and all the engineers that do this in commercial water plants for cities know this stuff, If you do this correctly, those water pipes are completely safe for human consumption. There's nothing wrong with them. And there's nothing wrong with the water that comes out of the tap either. There is no detectable lead in the water. You'd think that a lead pipe would inherently always poison you, and it's just not true. However, if you are stupid or inept or whatever, what ends up happening is that the chemicals get out of balance in the water. The water starts to leach that coating off the inside of the pipe. Now the lead goes in the water. Now you start poisoning little kids. Well, that's what happened in Flint, okay? This was not because they used lead-lined pipes. Everybody used lead-lined pipes because it was the only logical choice. No, maybe, well, you know what? They should have replaced them maybe, but hey, guess what? The city didn't have any money because we sent all of their jobs over to China and Mexico. You know, Flint used to be part of the car revolution in Michigan, and now not so much, right? Because what cars? You know, you got all these Milkadors and all this other bullshit down in Mexico. You have all this supply chain stuff going to China. You destroyed all of the lower and middle class jobs and therefore the tax base. This would just did a wonderful thing to the finances of cities like Flint. And then you add some corruption on top of it because, you know, Democrats are known for that. And oops, you got a problem. Anyway, Bernie has to manage to convince people that Bolshevism is the answer to this problem. And if he doesn't do it today, and he doesn't manage to get the votes today, my guess is his campaign is over. So we shall see what happens when the results come in this evening. But I think there's a very high probability. In fact, from the polling data I'm seeing, it looks like a certainty that the man is basically a protest candidate after tonight. But we shall see. We shall see. If Biden wins, and by the way, Biden, you know, there's a lot of screaming also coming from the Democrats, especially the chickies. You know, probably Miss Chickie from Washington's in this group too. Although I haven't seen her directly scream about this yet. Oh my God, it's so terrible. All we have is two white guys running for office left. Oh, excuse me. Why do you have two white guys running for office? Whose responsibility? Wouldn't it be the Democrat Party's responsibility to put up candidates that can actually do something and actually win? Where are all these qualified, very high qualified women that would like to be president of the United States and are Democrats? Could you show me the ones that are actually there aren't any that are running on the left? You have Foxahontas, you have Tulsi Gabbard, who, by the way, in terms of politics, I disagree with her on almost everything. However, would anybody like to argue with me about the fact that she appears to have the chops for the job? Well, because she does appear to have the chops for the job, and yet, how come she got no notice? How come she got no attention? Why is it that nobody wants her? And in fact, the Democrats, the party itself, keeps changing the rules to force her off debate stages. Now, I get it. She doesn't have the delegate counts. Okay, I never did. And therefore, from a numerical perspective, it's impossible for her to win at this point unless you have a brokered convention. And then, of course, she could. However, the party brass doesn't like her. So basically what you have here is you have a party, you have people in a party that are complaining that their own party screwed all of the candidates that actually have a brain and can think and can do basic arithmetic, okay, and aren't just a bunch of shills or senile old men or aren't Bolsheviks. And yet it's someone else's fault. It is not the party itself. It is not the voters. It is none of those things. It's someone else's fault. And boy, doesn't that tie back to what I was talking about in the ticker this morning about daddy government coming in to rescue us after we fuck up. Same thing that happened in Flint. Daddy government must come in and rescue us from the terrible, horrible lead in the water after we poisoned our residents. You see a pattern here? Well, you should, because guess what? It all ties together, doesn't it? All right, let's talk about the coronavirus stuff, the latest things. So I recorded this thing yesterday, right, my podcast, and about Italy slamming the northern part of the country closed, and now all of a sudden they slam the whole country closed. They clearly have a problem. It's out of control over there. By the way, the median age of the Italian person who has succumbed to this thing is something like 81. What have I been saying all along? Okay, if you're young or quite healthy, Okay, in other words, you can put 10 METs worth of output range into your cardiopulmonary system. You are probably at no significant risk. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't going to be people who are in that situation, who are nominally healthy in that kind of a way, don't get hit by this, because you might. All right, I had now, unfortunately, somebody that I went to high school with who was, this guy was the jock of all jocks, right? At a crazy level when I was in school. About 10, 15 years later, I get word that he has died. Now, he was never really a friend of mine. He was someone I knew because he was in the same class, graduating class as I was. And of course, he was very popular with the girls and everything else because, being a jock, that tends to go with the territory. However, he was literally walking down the hall in the office to go get a cup of coffee and dropped over dead. It's literally what happened to him. And it turns out that there was some kind of congenital problem that he had. He had no idea that there was an issue with his ticker. Well, guess what? There was, and he expired. It happens, folks. It's part of life. And you need to deal with the fact that it can happen to you, to anybody else, to people you love. This is part of reality, and I don't care whether you like it or not. It's the way it is, and it isn't going to change. The thing that you have to keep in mind, though, is that in terms of odds, if you are a healthy adult or a child, you're probably going to be just fine. You might get sick. You might have a really bad time of it, but you're going to be okay. I have not been doing any extraordinary things in terms of preparations, walking around the mask on all time, wearing vinyl gloves everywhere I go. None of that bullshit. Okay. Now, am I normally fairly careful, like if I have to go take a pee in a public restroom, like when I'm traveling, and am I normally pretty careful about those sorts? Yes, I am normally fairly careful about those sorts of things. Okay, and the reason I'm fairly careful about those sorts of things is because I don't feel like getting sick in the normal case, okay, and through the normal course of events. I just don't feel like having it happen. I don't like the idea of being ill. I don't enjoy it. It's not fun, yada, 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 yada. Okay, so yes, I do pay attention. Do I open doors if I can with my elbows or something other than grabbing it with my fingers? Yes. Do I try to keep my hands off my face, although I don't succeed at it all the time? Yes. Do I wash my hands after using a bathroom? Yes, I do. Why? Because it's the right thing to do. Okay. But am I running around with my hair on fire, buying, 4 years worth of toilet paper? No. Do I normally have enough food in my house and that, for a couple of weeks, I wouldn't even have to change much in terms of what I normally eat? Yeah. Do I also have an emergency stash? Well, yeah. And you know why? Because for the last 20 years, I've lived in a place that get these things called hurricanes. And sometimes when you get hurricanes, they're really bad. And your house might not be destroyed, but everything else might be. There might be no power for 2 or 3 weeks. You may be cooking using a barbecue grill and some propane tanks. And you better have the means to do that sort of thing. I also have the necessary equipment to go backcountry camping and survive for a couple of weeks out there and with only soft goods resupply. Okay, in other words, the stuff that goes down my pie hole and end up coming out the other end. And, oh, by the way, if there happens to be a really bad hurricane and there is no supply of any, as long as I have something I can cook, I've got a little isobutane camp stove and such and water purification equipment, and I will survive. I will be fine. I may not enjoy life very much when there are, but, there's, I was going to say mosquitoes because, all the bugs. However, I'm not so sure that that's the case either, because when we had a really bad hurricane in Northwest Florida, Ivan, that was a rough one, guys and girls. That got really close to flooding my house. It didn't do it, but I did not leave, and part of the reason I didn't leave is because I was very concerned that it might happen, and if it does, you'd better be there to perform the physical labor to get all of the wet drywall and flooring out right now, or you're going to have a major mold problem. And if you leave, the cops will frequently not let you come back. So I did not go. I stayed, against their advice, of course. I stayed anyway, didn't care. And, basically, I told them to go pound rocks. And the storm came. Interestingly enough, We had some friends of ours that were staying with us. Their judgment and mine as well was that my house was better equipped to withstand the storm that was coming than theirs. It turned out to be correct. After the storm, we went back to their place, and I don't know if it was an embedded tornado or just shitty construction and maintenance or whatever, but the roof had been lifted, dropped back on, cockeyed, and it rained inside for 8 hours. Now, think about how much fun you would have had if you were in there. Yeah, that would have sucked. Okay, big time, folks. The place was a gut job. It literally was a gut job. My house, on the other hand, took essentially zero damage. I mean, the pool enclosure was trashed, all the screening and everything, and we had a whole shitload of debris in the pool. But in terms of actual structural damage, the amount was goose egg. No flooding either. Okay, now that was in no small part because we were there to defend against it. But nonetheless, another couple inches and we would have got wet, real wet. We didn't, thank God. But I was there specifically for the possibility that it was going to happen. But the point being, I'm prepared for this kind of thing anytime. Okay, somebody tells you, but if I get this, you must bug in for the next month. I'll be okay. You should be okay too. Those people that think, well, I live somewhere where these kinds of things. Oh, really? You live somewhere where these kinds of things don't happen? Yes, they do happen. Okay, the entire West Coast is pretty much a fault zone. Many people on the West Coast lived in places where if you get the wrong sort of earthquake, you could get a tsunami on top of it, especially up towards the northwest corner. All right. An awful lot of people live close enough that you could really get hammered by that, and you'd be shocked at the heights of some of the predictions of water inundation from those. There won't be anything left if that happens, folks. If you happen to be there, you're going to be very dead. All right, if you get a warning like that and you can't get out for whatever reason, like, there's a bunch of other people trying to get out too, you're going to die. And that's just the way it is. And oh, by the way, you don't get any warning. One of the nice things about hurricanes, tornadoes are kind of a bitch because you get 30 seconds and oops. One of the things about hurricanes is that you typically get several days worth of warning. So if you sit there and let a hurricane smash you, you kind of sort of have it coming because you had the opportunity to leave and chose not to do it. Whose fault is that? It certainly isn't the hurricane's fault, right? Yeah, okay. But anyway, coronavirus, listen, this nursing home out in Kirkland, the death rate has at this point radically surpassed my worst expectations. It's about double now, double to triple, somewhere in there. They're not even sure about the rest. That place has essentially been depopulated by almost half. All right, folks, that's not that surprising. All right, but if you want to know why, after all these years, how long have I been screaming about this stuff with eating low carb, getting rid of the excess weight, solving to the extent you can the comorbidities that you might have? I've been yelling about this for a very long period of time, and this is one of the reasons why. Because this kind of thing will happen. And you say, well, it's no big deal. We have a pill. I can do this. I can do that. No. Yes, you can take a pill and survive for right now. However, the frailty is still there. It does not solve the problem. Anyway, you need to be thinking about this, folks. I mean, I get it. If the metabolic damage that you've done over those years is so great that there's really not a lot you can do right now, well, you may have a date with St. Peter. For those of you that think that screaming to daddy government, oh my God, let's test everybody. Yeah, that'll be a really good idea. Let's send everyone out. Let's send all these healthcare workers out to test absolutely everyone for coronavirus. Are you kidding me? Do you have any idea how stupid that is? Do you know how stupid it would be if everybody that got the sniffles or a cold or a fever went to the doc and got tested? Do you know what would actually happen if you did that? The reality is that this is the end of winter, right? This is the end of flu season, but people are still getting the flu. And it is far more common than coronavirus. And it will be. Even if this thing explodes in our face, it will be. So you're going to take one person who has coronavirus and you're going to expose in that office or in that clinic or in that EMS place or in that whatever, you're going to expose all of the other people who are there. and you're going to give it to them. And the absolute worst time to get something that attacks your lungs is when you have a respiratory infection already. Do you really want to do that? Do you know not only will you kill people this way directly, but you are also going to expose the very real possibility for mutation, viral reassortment, and the possibility that we create something that's even more virulent that gets out there. Now, most of the time, mutations, viruses or anything else, happens to be very detrimental to the life cycle of that organism, and that is why, for the most part, these mutations don't take, because they aren't beneficial to the organism becoming more lethal, more whatever, okay, or more virulent. Viruses, by the way, the ones that are extremely lethal and fast, that's very, from a genetic propagation perspective, that's very bad. You don't want to kill the host, all right, or at least not until you've spread yourself a whole bunch of different places. All right, so that would be a very negative thing for the life cycle of the virus. But it's something that increases transmissibility would be very good from the life cycle of the virus's point of view. Let's not encourage things that do that. Okay, let's not. And I understand that from the time that you go from, hey, listen, this is a cough and a respiratory thing, to, oh, shit, can be very short, and by then there may not be anything that can be done. One of the things that you've got a lot of the wokies screaming about is we ought to have an immediate crash program to build lots of ICUs with the ability to intubate people. Folks, that's stupid. Okay, it's really stupid. First off, those all need to be negative pressure rooms if you're dealing with an infectious agent. Intubating somebody is an extraordinarily invasive procedure, and it sprays stuff all over the place. If you've ever actually, I know everybody's seen this on TV. I got news for you, folks. Television is not reality. All right, reality is that intubation is one of the most invasive procedures that is ever done outside of an operating room. And it happens to be one that spreads biological material all over, which is why if you have any opportunity to do it, you do it in full PPE, especially if you think there is some kind of infectious thing going on. You want to know how healthcare workers are getting infected. That's one of the ways. Because if you have to do this and you don't know that that person is carrying an infectious thing, and therefore you're not all kitted up, or you don't have time to get all kitted up, because if you don't do it right now, the person's going to die, well, that's a problem. All right. Secondly, the other thing that goes along with this is, having done that, now what? Okay, because the reality is, as I pointed out in a previous podcast, this is not going to change the outcome for most people who get intubated. I got bad news for you. Yes, can this in some cases result in a save? Sure, it does. But is it going to save all of those people? No. Is it going to save maybe half of them? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that you even get to 50%. All right. And secondly, could we build all these ICUs and all this other? No. And if we did, it would be at the tail end of this. Although maybe we're going to get round 2, I think, next winter. I don't know if this thing will attenuate into the summer or not. My guess is it probably will to some extent, because as humidity goes up, droplet spread goes down. But see, again, I have the operating theory that has still not been disabused by any of the data that has come out, folks, that despite what people are saying, a huge route on this thing is fecal oral. All right. And you're not going to hear this, because as soon as you do, then we start focusing on the third world nations and cultural issues and things like this, and nobody wants to go there. Because if you go there, now, my God, now we're going to have racism enter into it. Guess what, folks? Epidemiology is about facts. It is not about feelings. You want to play feels? Well, you go ahead and you do that with a lethal virus, and what you're going to do is get people killed. And I have a suspicion that we're going to have much more in the way of feels over the next few days and weeks, and not so much facts. You want to talk about suppressing information? Yeah, well, why is it that you think that all of these people at this Kirkland nursing home got it? How many of them are incontinent? How many people are changing their adult diapers? And by the way, what are you doing with the diapers? Is that treated as hazardous medical waste? And if it is, how's it being encapsulated between the time that it gets taken off the person who just crapped their pants and makes it to wherever the disposal is? What keeps that from shedding virus particles into the air, which then gets inhaled by somebody else, and aw crap, now here we go. By the way, the other person who could inhale it could very well be the caregiver who wiped the butt and then went into the next room. And he doesn't know that he's got it, and therefore, even though you would think, okay, there would be precautions taken, all right, hand washing, whatever, he's shedding virus in his respiratory droplets, but he doesn't feel sick yet. And he's got 2 weeks to get everybody else in place and dose them real good. And they're all weak, and they all can't sustain more than a 2 or 3 METs change in their metabolic output, and it gets into their lungs and it kills them. Well, guess what? That is an exact fit as a hypothesis for what actually happened in Kirkland. It's an exact fit. Do you still think I'm wrong? Well, then show me some facts that disabuse me of the notion that this is a major route. It's not the whole answer, folks, by any stretch of the imagination. Certainly, if somebody who's symptomatic and coughs on you, and the droplets get far enough, that cloud of stuff, you inhale some of it, yeah, that could certainly get you. No question. But I think there's a bigger story here, because the way that this thing's spreading from asymptomatic people who do not have close personal contact, you're not sleeping with them, you don't kiss them, even hand contact, I don't know if that's enough. Okay, maybe it is, maybe it's not, maybe a handshake's enough, maybe it's not. Okay, but a person who is just ordinarily breathing, ordinary respiration, very little in terms of droplet production is going on. Coughing and sneezing produces a lot of droplets. Ordinary respiration, not so much. So why are we getting where's the transmission vector? Where's the viral load? Where is the lion's share of that? And I'm telling you, folks, there's more to this. Okay, there's more to this. This is not measles. Just saying. Anyway, all right, enough rant for today, folks. Enjoy your day. I see as I finish this up that my nice little bouncy position got stopped out. That's perfectly fine. Happy to take the money. Thank you very little. And I'll go enjoy my lower gas prices, although up 7%, well, it's probably going to go up a little bit. But the other day I managed to fill up for well sub $2. So 186 or 189, something like that. Boy, that was very pleasant. So we'll see how much more of that we get. Folks, keep your head on straight. And oh, by the way, the other thing that's interesting about today that I think is quite amusing is that the TNX is now trading at 0.64%, which is up 1.42. Basically, it was trading at 5 yesterday. That is a 28% change. Now, you want to talk about people that are getting blown up. The bond market and the oil market are the two places to look, because I think there's plenty of exploding going on in people's accounts there. I'm your ticker guy. Have a good one.